What's happening, y'all? This talk is called, oh shit, you're laughing already, huh? I will swear. This talk is called Tales from the Script, huh? So let's start with a little bit of a tale. So about 4 years ago, I bought a house pre-construction. I begged, borrowed, and stole my way through my life savings to buy like a shoebox in Toronto. The price of living in the six, right? Pretty fucking painful. So throughout the past 4 years, we received very little to no updates about how this build was going. Luckily, we lived nearby. We watched it come up. But like software, we didn't really know the nuts and bolts of what was going on behind the scenes. We showed up for our inspection 2 months ago or something to go see the unit. We were sold some visions of, CGI everything. Check out this CGI room. I can almost smell it. It's beautiful. Most importantly, CGI fucking dog right here. That's what we bought, right? So we were expecting to walk into something like this, having not heard anything otherwise. And we walk up to the unit, and the guy doing our inspection, a lovely gentleman named Sheldon, turned to us as we approached the front door and said, "Hey, just so you know, some things aren't done." We walked into the unit, and we're hit with like a 45-degree heat wave. It was like one of the hottest days in the summer 2 months ago. And he was like, "Yeah, the AC, it doesn't work. The stove, the dishwasher, they're not installed yet." So we look over, and there's like literally gaping holes with really thick like electric util-you-die wires hanging out. And we got fairly frustrated. We're like, well, where was the update before this? Because, dude, we have movers booked to come into this unit tomorrow morning at 9. We got to move in. So we're shocked. We're disappointed. We're getting angry. My wife and I are trying to temper each other. And while this is happening, they start testing the fire alarm. Cherry on the cake, man. I don't know if you've heard of fire alarm in one of these new units, but it's like an air horn meets a strobe light. And it is so insanely painful, and it's literally right above us. And it starts going off in the middle of him being like, "Yeah, this isn't done, that isn't," and it was just like, it was like written to be terrible, couldn't have been any worse. So of course that added to our stress, to our consternation, to our frustration. We got super pissed. I found edges of my personality that I don't often express. I'm a pretty chill dude. But man, I freaked out. And continued to freak out for the next couple of days on the folks responsible for what I saw this opaque process being. Real estate is very, very opaque unless you know it well. Again, like software. I got mad, I swore, I slammed shit, I did things I'm not proud of. I had to take a step back and say, hey, as a human being, what kind of change do I want to make in this world? What kind of person do I want to be? I always preach to lead with love, so I said, hey, let's try to do that in this situation. So the next time I saw Sheldon in the parking garage, it's like a week later or something, we came by every single day to make sure things were getting fixed. I saw him in the parking garage and was like, hey, Sheldon, tell me a bit about you, man. Oh, I forgot to mention, I got a little baby, Theo, this wonderful dude, and he wasn't having it. He's not trying to move into that unit. He's not trying to get electrocuted or hear those fire alarms or live in no air conditioning. And we do it all for this guy, right? So that made it even worse. So when I saw Sheldon next in the parking garage, I asked him about his life. What's up with you, man? Turns out he has a kid that's the same age. Turns out he's bought pre-construction before. He's been working in the trades for like 10 years. And he's like, I hate this. This is how it is, and it's so painful. And we related on that, and I was like, I work in software. It's also hard to rationalize to a stakeholder what you've built and why when they can't really understand what happened behind the scenes. And so we formed a bit of a bond, And I all of a sudden liked the guy. And I was like, okay, now I just have to do this with every single contractor on my floor, because there are many, they're still working on the building. And so every day when I'm leaving for work or coming home, I go in the hallway and I'm like, hey, drywall guy, I'm Liam. We're on your list, right? Awesome. Kitchen dude? We're next, huh? And I get their names, I learn a bit about them, and I become like the glad hander of our floor. Mostly to manipulate those relationships into what I want, but also to become friends. And over the past couple months, that's actually gotten a lot of the work that we needed done. So this is me and Theo, smiling. We're happy now, and we now have lots of friends in the building who, I think like us, but also know we need to get shit done real quick. This story is the sort of first lesson in Tales from the Script that, sure, relationships are the first problem to solve, but in any of our careers and our jobs, they're often the only problem to solve if you're having a hard time getting what you need or doing the work that you love. I sent out a tweet a little while back. Hey, what you want to hear about? Do you want me to make you laugh, cry, or hug? And most of you said all of the above. I'm not sure if any of you are in this room who actually answered this, but I will try to do my best with that. In order to do that, because this is a more engineering-focused audience, let me just ask, actually, how many of y'all call yourselves engineers? Okay, tight. Hi, nice to meet you. So I sat down with a bunch of engineering leaders that I've had the pleasure of working with throughout the years and asked them to tell me a tale of horror, a tale of glory, and a lesson that they learned. And it was so beautiful. I learned so much cool stuff that I'll share with you today, and hopefully it'll be useful to you as creators of software of all walks, not just engineers, because I'm not an engineer. Wait, you can't hear me that way. I'm not an engineer. Is that better? But I've worked with enough to kind of know what's up. Tales from the Script. Let's get it. Who the fuck is this guy? Why am I talking about this stuff? I've had the pleasure of building product for all of these great companies and many more throughout my career. As my introduction mentioned, I started as an illustrator, quickly moved into software, and for the past 15 years or so have had the pleasure of building stuff for people like this. Right now, I lead the UX practice, as mentioned, at Loblaw Digital. Where's my cool transition? Whoo! My name's Liam. Follow me on Twitter. And as was also mentioned, we're hiring and stuff, so reach out to me anytime. The one thing I've learned about user experience and building product over the years is that it doesn't really matter how beautiful that layout is or how well it tested or how great your Figma design system is, because we don't ship pictures, right? We ship code. And so any good product or any good UX decision is reliant upon incredible engineers like yourselves. So the relationship between design and engineering is intricately important to me. Let's talk about the first lesson I learned. So I interviewed one of our tech leads at Loblaw Digital. He leads our mobile practice, Mamoon. And he talked about his experience with Shomi. You guys heard of Shomi? A couple of years ago, right? Came out at the same time as Crave. So they tried to come to market. There was like a consortium of the telcos and cable companies that were like, hey, let's make a Netflix for Canada. And Crave and Shomi started around that time. And one succeeded and one failed. He was the tech lead for Shomi. Let me tell you what happened. Shomi, back to the title, most vulnerable player. We all talk about minimum viable products, MVPs, and most large organizations don't do it well or don't know how to do it. And this is a great example of that. Instead of shipping an MVP, they shipped a very vulnerable asset across every single platform that they could possibly manage and more. This thing was practically coming out on Atari, and it was like they did everything kind of mediocre, if not poorly, all at once. So to come to market, they were like, no, we have to have something for everybody, right? And that's not the concept of MVP. The best thing to do here would have been focus on one platform. I don't care. iOS, I do care. Focus on where your customers are right now, whether it's web, some mobile platform, whatever, and create an incredible product market fit and incredible value there. And if folks are asking for your product elsewhere and saying, hey, why isn't this on Android, or why isn't this on web, or whatever, then you've done it right, right? So start somewhere and do one thing well first, before doing everything sort of poorly. Another example from Shomi. I face this all the time when I'm trying to use a new product. Even just the binary of log in with Twitter or log in with Facebook is enough to make me be like, I don't fucking know. I'm frustrated already. If it's more, log in with Google, sign up with your email, etc. It's really hard for me to actually cognitively make that decision based on any information. So when Shomi launched, they did this. Log in with everything. We'll take your passport. We don't care. Whereas what we really needed to say, and a lot of people didn't know it was a collaboration between Shaw and Rogers, Behind the scenes, we can just take your email and diff it against whatever account we have for you on those platforms or not, and do the hard work behind the scenes. Don't make the customer think, right? As much as, or more than they really have to. Same with Facebook. If you chose to log in with Facebook, you find that most of your users or potential audience are on Facebook. Have them sign in there, and then diff their account details against what you know about them and create a better experience. Don't ask somebody in their first experience of your product to make a very, very difficult choice with no assigned benefit. So the customer says, don't make me think, man. And y'all, you got to do the thinking for us, right? This is an old principle of UX going back, 30 years. Don't make me think, but it's like every time I see something like this, it frustrates me. The last thing, and probably the most important thing, that was confirmed by my conversation with Mamoon was you need to learn how your business makes money and study it. If you're working for a startup, for yourself, for a big company, if you don't know how that business makes money, you won't understand how or why to get to the answer of no or yes. Make sure that everybody on your team understands whether this business model is sound. And so for any new person joining our team or existing members of our team, we do sessions with our CFO and folks who actually manage the money and do the forecasting for how we're going to change if we need to. If we see competition in the market that's eating our lunch, what are we actually going to do about our business model to address those things? If you're not having those conversations, or at least understanding on paper, where does money come from, how do we spend it, and how do we get more, then you don't really understand why you're doing the work you're doing. Money is coming in from some big bag on one side, and if the business model is sound, sure, it's going to go into a deep bank of future investment in your career and the company. If not, it's going to float away like show me. So this adage of the business model being your most important constraint is really, really, really true to me. It's an engineering constraint, but it's also a constraint for everybody. Everybody needs to know how their company makes money. It sounds basic, but any designer or engineer on any team, if you ask them about the business model or how this feature they're going to ship is going to improve the bottom line, a lot of the time it's hard to answer. And of course, as human-centered thinkers, ideally, we're often skewing towards the customer benefit, and that is equally as important. But as you roll features up and down the ladder of approvals, be they to your customer or most importantly to the business, you'll hear lots of yeses and nos that go back to the business model, less so to customer need. And if you understand it, you're equipped to debate. Let's talk about ruinous empathy at scale. Number 2. So at Loblaw Digital, this is so fucking cool. We have a productivity engineering team led by this guy, Justin Comu. And this team's motto is to reduce toil, increase happiness, and get shit done. They're not responsible for shipping any consumer-facing products. They just ship internal tooling. And it's amazing. They automate things like QA, they create Slack bots that help us create accounts, whatever we need. They write scripts to help teams save tons of time. And it's a team of 25 people or something. It's massive. And the things they do are really, really interesting. And at the scale that we are, as Canada's biggest retailer, it's a super valuable practice. So let's take an example from what they do. So on our websites, we sell stuff. We sell diapers. I've already said a couple times today that about an hour and a half ago, I was changing a diaper of my lovely boy Theo. So I'm on here shopping for diapers all the time, and I need to see the right product image to know what I'm going to buy. As you can imagine, we sell millions of diapers, many, many brands, and all the vendors who sell those brands through our platforms need to send us images. Sometimes we shoot them, but a lot of the time at scale we don't, and so they provide us these images. And you can see across the bottom, how this is nested in our file structure, and this, you can imagine there are big sizing constraints and scale constraints to what the images we need to receive are. So the problem we observed is that every vendor product image was a different size, different spec, different name, whatever. And so our creative services team was burdened with manually renaming or using a terminal-based Python script to rename and then resizing in Photoshop, and it was so much work. It was like the most arduous, frustrating task ever for that team. Literally people spending weeks of time doing this, week over week. So the productivity engineering team took that problem and created Photo Automator. So user-friendly, like very, very light one-screen interface that helps us rename and resize images using image magic, and does it all in the back end. So you sort of take a batch of images, you drop it into this thing, you give it some parameters, and it kicks out exactly what you need, resized exactly how you need it, named exactly how you need, in the right folders. And, to those of you who are engineers in the room, yeah, this, is probably easier. To me, this is fucking magic. I'm like, holy shit, that computer can do this? And of course it can, I know it can, but this is true magic, and it did reduce the processing time of that team by about 50% and took their 6-week turnaround down to 2. So things like that, are a real sort of hallmark of what that team does, and we'll talk in a minute about how to maybe do that within teams that you work for. Creating productivity magic is really the sort of bottom line here. If you are a wizard of engineering things and you know how this works, it might take you a day or two to build that solution. And the business is like, wow, that is extremely valuable and makes you look extremely good and can create a lot of leverage for the engineering practice you work for. Now, on the back of this, Justin's team was faced with this question: what kind of ice cream shop do they want to be? So they had just done like a Dairy Queen, like the creative services team came to them and had a problem. They were like, word up, we'll solve that. Took a week, ship it. And they got exactly what they wanted, exactly when they want it. And it was great. I mean, it needs some iteration, the quality is not perfect, but it is what it is, and they got it done quickly. On the other side of the equation are boutique ice cream shops like Sweet Jesus or Bang Bang or whatever, where they actually cultivate a line down the block. They want people to wait in order to create that sort of artificial mystique of the quality of their product, and often it is very good. And so as you find your fit within an organization and do things that are incredibly valuable, know that all of a sudden you might have a lineup out your door, and how quickly does it benefit you to serve them. Here's an example of where this really went wrong for Justin's team. Loblaw is a super old company, 100 years to be exact. So we use super old software. At the enterprise, so Loblaw Digital, just for context, is like a 400-person sort of business in Liberty Village that helps enable the enterprise to transform products digitally and creates most of those products. But at the enterprise, of course, there are still a lot of people managing workflow and managing some digital assets. And they were using this thing called HP, quality control, is that what it is? Quality Center. And it was just like the wrong tool. And they've been using it for years, and it was very frustrating and slowing them down. And so they had heard through folks at Loblaw Digital and Justin that Jira was the jam. We all used Jira, and Jira was beautiful, and it was really efficient for us to manage like software workflow and pipeline automation and all that good stuff. So Justin said, hey, I'm going to Dairy Queen you guys. I'm going to give you Jira. Let's do this, in and out. And so he set them up with Jira, and they started using it way too much and with way too little guidance. And how they started customizing the interface and customizing the structure of Jira actually implicated our workflows too. And it's crazy what language can do. If you change the name of your first column in Jira from ready to start work, the expectations of what's going to happen in that column are drastically different. So all of a sudden, a bunch of work was starting haphazardly in all kinds of different directions. But most importantly, what happened, so we're about 400 at Loblaw Digital, and there's about 2,000 at headquarters, and everybody at headquarters got an account. And so all of a sudden, our Jira account management process was totally broken. The system slowed down, and it affected everybody. So this cascaded throughout the organization and became a nightmare that they're dealing with right now. Kind of like that. Those are all the people using Jira who don't know how to use Jira. And so what he learned from this was to understand, of course, your limits, but also manage how you're perceived. Had he sort of gauged the true, interest of the organization in using this, understood who the stakeholders were, how many people wanted to get on it, and maybe started smaller with one team and not sort of handing an open license and an open doorway to the organization for it, it would have been more manageable. Now he's sort of like peeling back things and having to work with Jira to help us and like aligning all kinds of things. It's become a full-time job just doing this. And so had he created the Sweet Jesus model for this and asked folks to, wait until we have time to assess the problem and do it properly, then we will be able to support you in the future as you scale this out. Maybe some obvious stuff, but if you're working in a larger organization, these things are critical, and everybody's looking for productivity magic, but be careful how you sprinkle it into their lives. So I learned about this concept of big O notation a long time ago and didn't understand it. I had it explained to me fairly well recently, and I bet you everybody here knows it better than I. Is everybody familiar with this concept, big O notation? Okay, cool. Oh man, I'm going to look really bad right now. Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, and please do. Big O notation is a way to measure the efficacy of an algorithm over time based on input, complexity of input, and the time that input occurs, and how insanely complex or big the job gets as you're sort of processing an algorithm or processing data through an algorithm. And so there's one version, like the creative services model, where it's like, great, we build a thing, the input steadily increases over time, but it doesn't get too much more complex. But then there's the Jira model where, shit gets really hairy over time and gets much, much, much worse. The point here is just that knowing how your behavior will scale is really, really critical. And we all talk about scale all the time, but this was like a really critical example of where we should have thought about that more intentionally up front. There's a human example to explain big O notation that was much more relatable to me, which is take a vacation that you're on. So say you're going away for a day, and you're not going to check your Slack or email or whatever you use during that day. You're going to come back the next day, and you're going to have a handful of messages to follow up on. It's not so bad. Say you're going away for a month. If you don't check anything for a month, and you come back, the volume of work, effort, and cognitive overhead that you experience is exponentially greater than were you to check it every couple of days for 10 minutes. I would never advise for anybody to check their email while they're on vacation. But it is an example of this concept of algorithmic scale, where it's like, if I don't check it for a month and I come back, I'm going to spend 2 days underwater losing my shit, trying to read everything and catch up on everything and dying, whereas had I checked it every couple of days, I would be back into my workflow very seamlessly. Let's talk about predicting human behavior. Nick Kuhn joined Loblaw Digital maybe 3-4 months ago and has a storied history as a tech lead and now product manager, sales engineer, et cetera. A very talented cat. And when we first met him at my previous agency, TWG, he was building a product called Impressed. It was basically the chat books of like 5 years ago. A simple software product that allowed folks to design books on a device, an iPad or their phone or whatever, and publish those books and have them printed. So it solved a really cool need, something that's very popular now. Chatbooks is a huge company. There's many like it. A lot of people are doing this. But at the time, it was sort of new. And also at the time, emojis have a long history. They've been around since the 90s, but really, in our daily lives. Apple released them onto the Apple keyboard in 2013. And it became like a secondary mode of communication, perhaps a primary one, overnight, right? So all of a sudden, everybody was using emojis to communicate. And Impress, the company that was like Chatbooks, did not account for that at all. And so now, like, titles and body copy and all the different things, all the different content that their customers were putting into these books was full of emojis, which relied on a UTF-16 character set, and they were only built for UTF-8. And it was a small, small team. It was like 5 people trying to build this thing. And as the use of emojis grew, the platform slowed down and eventually just started stalling and crashing because it couldn't process. A lot of this work was being handed to a printer as well, so to parse whatever data over to the printer, it was like such a pain. And so it actually clogged their business to the point where they couldn't ship any books. All they were dealing with was customer complaints. They were trying to create guardrails around using emojis instead of like actually implement them properly. But it was so difficult for them to actually account for this change within human behavior. They weren't set up for it. They weren't ready to stop on a dime. And a lot of us, as we build a product, don't sort of think about, the unexpected things that people will do. And the unexpected things that technology will do. New releases, new things like keyboards, new platforms, often we don't see them coming. And so how do you enable a team to actually be nimble enough to address problems as they happen and solve unpredictable problems? This is probably the hardest thing to do in our jobs. When something goes wrong that you didn't see coming, how do you stop and solve it? Back to the house metaphor, it's story time, and that's me. We talked about my condo, which I'm very lucky to have, and I feel very privileged to have at the beginning. And a lot of my job at Loblaw is to tell stories about how and why we're building software. And again, it's very opaque. A lot of stakeholders who've never touched a line of code don't even know how this shit works. Don't get it. And you have to boil it down into simple metaphors. And so the metaphor that we're sort of working on right now, which is totally NDA, so don't tell anybody I told you, is the metaphor that's very human, right? That's about community, that's about neighborhoods. And I encourage you all to, as you talk through a problem or a solution, to try to reach for relatable metaphors. Is it a restaurant? Is it architecture? Is it a playground? Is it cooking? Is it, what is a story that's more relatable than Jamstack or React Native or I shipped this feature using all these complex things? How do you actually tell this to folks who essentially are going to advocate for you to continue to build meaningful things? So the metaphor works like this. It's pretty simple, I hope. First, you build a house. So building an app or a website is like building a home. A stable and comfortable home needs things like a solid foundation. So let's call that, your search catalog or maybe a payment solution. It needs an efficient layout. This is like, your lightest touch MVP user experience. What screens are going to be in this thing? What features is it going to have based on what your customers needed? And it's going to have personalized elements that actually make the home unique. So, artwork or smart home stuff or cool things that make it yours. But it's just a house at this point. Now you put some people into it. Yeah. And you create a home. So it plugs into a network of shared services, which are human, but also technical, like a stable power grid and plumbing. Now you're sort of like reaching into the ground and accessing what else this neighborhood has. You're looking at roads and infrastructure like that. What kind of infrastructure is going to support a healthy life in this home? And of course, you're going to have humans in it. So this is people coming into a platform, and this is integrating across other services, shared services, things that you bought and didn't build, that help you actually create a home that is stable and has predictable plumbing and power, so that the people within it can live their best lives. Now, maybe this metaphor only works sort of in a larger organization, but I think it's helpful to think about, okay, now I've got a home. We all live in neighborhoods, whether we love them or hate them, whether you know your neighbors or not. The neighborhood has a bunch of shared services that create a quality of life that's hopefully meaningful and inspiring to the folks who live within the neighborhood. So once a home is inhabited and filled with love, it becomes part of a community. So now you've got parks, you've got recreational facilities, you have maybe community events and relationships, you have a sense of belonging and wellness that's shared within a broader group. So when I think about scaling services and scaling products, metaphors like this have been extremely valuable to tie each of these bullets and many more back to like, okay, what is the thing we're building right now, and why does it matter to the neighborhood? You know, we're still adjusting the foundation in that first house. We need to make sure that it's stable so that every home can plug into a better search catalog. And now, once it becomes a neighborhood, now we're going to use that search catalog to empower personalization. Call it the park that you're going to go to, and all the toys that you're going to drop off in it become a personalized aspect of your shared experience in this neighborhood. This kind of storytelling is super fun for me, and I think valuable to our business, but it's really important for you all to think as engineering folk and just software creators, which of these metaphors is going to work for the work that you're doing and how it might actually change your perception within an organization. Storytelling. Your solution is only as good as the story you tell. It's not just that. You know, solution has to be dope too. And if this isn't your forte, you know, partner up with somebody who can do it. Do some design thinking exercises to actually abstract yourself from the day-to-day work and understand what the broader picture is and the story that you could tell might be. Now, my friends, this is where I make you hug. Yeah. So, it's your turn. One of the benefits of FITC for me over the years has been to make great connections with super talented people and to learn about what makes them tick. And I often leave this conference with new friends, new contacts, future hires, future managers, whatever it might be, folks that I might work with, or people I can just ask for advice from. So, I'm kind of like a natural introvert, and when I come to these things, it's kind of easy for me to keep my head down. So I do force people to talk to each other, because it's super fun, right? And so, I would love for you to think about these questions for yourself, you know, something that you've witnessed or been part of that was outstanding, something that was really, really difficult or went very poorly, and maybe a lesson that you've learned, or even just some advice you want. I'm sure you're all working on things that are related to each other. There's many platforms and languages we all use to build software, and I'm sure folks in this room are super familiar with the things and the problems that you're solving. So, interaction time. Everybody, please turn to the person beside you, shake their hand, introduce yourself, and let's have a chat about these questions. Yeah, I hear it happening. I know some of you are already familiar. Maybe reach out, try to talk to others. Aw, this is so nice. So nice to see people making friends. Please make some friends. It's these relationships that will hopefully come up throughout the rest of your careers. You'll remember this person you're talking to right now. You'll remember what they told you, what advice they gave you. Maybe they're hiring. Maybe you're hiring. Make a buddy. Ask them to help you. So sweet. Don't be shy. Break out of your shell. You got this. I'm now going to take a video of you all sharing, because it's the sweetest. FITC, y'all are making friends, sharing stories, relationships that'll last a lifetime. It's adorable. Please continue these conversations while you're talking. I will say, hey, we're hiring at Loblaw Digital all the time. A lot of engineering talent is required in our business. If you're interested in chatting with me or others, please stay right here and talk to me, or go to that website, find a thing, reach out to me on Twitter or my website. And I'm going to jump into the audience and have some chats with y'all now too. That's it for me, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to Tales from the Script. Hey-o!